Good evening, everybody. The work session of the ISD 279 School Board is being held in the Forum Room of the Educational Service Center at 11200 93rd Avenue North in Maple Grove on Tuesday, September 10th, 2024. The work session is being audio recorded. The recording will be made available on the district website within 2 business days after the work session has ended. With regard to the audio recording, our communications staff has asked that we share a friendly reminder that side conversations during the work session are picked up by the recorder and can affect sound quality. Also, conversations during transitions between agenda items are on the recording as well. The intent of the school board work session is to allow for school board discussion of topics. Work sessions do not include an opportunity for audience members to address the board. To acknowledge attendance this evening, I'll ask that all present at the table state their name, starting to my left.
Jackie Mosqueda Jones, school board member.
Thomas Brooks, school board member.
Heather Douglas, school board member.
Anthony Paradis, Executive Director of Technology.
Kay Valella, Executive Director of Community Relations.
John Morstead, Executive Director of Finance and Operations.
Brian Bass, Assistant Superintendent for Equity and Achievement.
Steve Flisk, Assistant Sup for the elementary schools.
Brian Severson Hall, Executive Director of Community Engagement.
Kelly Parpart, Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Schools.
Sarah Mitchell, school board member. Yvonne Churchland, Executive Director of Human Resources.
Amy Moore, General Counsel.
And Kim Heil, Superintendent.
And I, Tanya Prince, school board member, am present. The purpose of school board work sessions is to build trust and teamwork, to exchange information, and when applicable, to provide direction in order to facilitate efficient and effective decision-making at regular board meetings. Dr. Howard, please share your check-in.
Thank you, Vice Chair Prince and school board members, Chair Mosqueda Jones. Welcome for this evening. We're going to get started right away, and we'll be speaking on attendance boundary changes. And this evening, leading that, we will have Kay Valilla and John Morstead, please.
Superintendent Heil, members of the board, thank you so much for this opportunity. John Morstead, Executive Director of Finance and Operations, and I are co-leading this change process. We're here tonight to update you on next steps. Over the next several months, elementary and middle school attendance boundaries will be reviewed to determine needed changes. These adjustments will reassign the elementary and or middle school some households are zoned to attend. Our community support of building a better future in 2023 is helping to minimize the extent of these changes, though. I would like to add, too, that FMAC has taken a close look at our facilities over the years, too, and has helped us really get to this point that we are here tonight, too. There'll be multiple ways for staff, students, parents, and community members to be involved throughout this process. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But first, let's talk about who we want to make sure we connect with and the goals we have in communicating with them. So our audiences that we are focusing on are, of course, you, our school board, and both staff and families at district, elementary, and middle schools. Similar to other communication programs, our goals are to ensure clear, comprehensive communication that is timely and easily accessible, ensure widespread community understanding, and minimize misinformation. Unique to the attendance boundary process, as we know this process might be a little bit of a roller coaster ride for some. We want to make sure that we're easing the anxiety with communication that reflects the district's care and concern for all of our staff, students, and parents and caregivers. We also want to create opportunities for audiences to share their thoughts and ask questions. And last but not least, certainly, we want to maintain students enrolled in our district. Here's a look at the timeline. This is going to be happening over much of this coming school year. In late September, which we are just about approaching, we're sharing an update with our community, and we're just offering them an opportunity to provide some feedback digitally on what we should be considering as we start this process. We also are going to be launching a website with FAQ on it. In October and November, our core team, which I'll talk a little bit about here in a minute, is going to be working on developing scenarios using those considerations that have been shared by the community. In December, we'll have some staff engagement, specifically our principals, just on what those scenarios drafts have come out to be. Make sure there aren't any red flags. And then in January is when the community engagement will really begin, in the sense that those drafts will be presented to our community members, and staff, parents, and caregivers and students will have opportunity to provide their feedback on what they're seeing. That will be done digitally. It will also be done in person. We'll have some informational meetings as well. Then in February, that information will be taken back and then adjustments will be made on those drafts. March, we'll do similarly to what happened in January. We'll have some opportunity to provide feedback on those amended scenarios. We'll do that digitally and in informational meetings as well. Then in April 2025, if there is still some need for some changes, we'll have some additional school level meetings. Just kind of have to see how things turn out at that point in time. And then likely, and then April and May, the final attendance boundaries will be announced. Now, before those are announced, it will come back to you as school members to review. And then May 2025 until August 2026, when we know what those attendance boundaries are, right? We're going to have our schools preparing to welcome students that they may be seeing new for the first time at their sites. January 2026 to August 2026, we'll repeatedly share what the new attendance boundaries are. With the goal in September 2026, they'll go into effect. We want to make sure that all students go to their appropriate school on day one of school that year, and then they feel welcome when they do go there. So the core team, we're calling this a core team. This has been established to help lead the attendance boundary change process. You can see John and I are guiding the group's conversation, and that we have representatives in several impacted areas involved with this. The team has met twice in late July and just yesterday as well. Some of the pieces that the team has reviewed in their time together: policies and procedures that have attendance boundary related content. Those are policy 725, so establishing school attendance boundaries. 558, that's a procedure, enrollment options program, and then 707, which is our transportation policy. You have copies of those in your board packet if you would like to review them tonight as well. Yesterday we reviewed lots of information, including building a better future, enrollment trends, capacity, target class sizes and development, open enrollment, and in-district transfer and transportation. So this really is grounding on all team members, so we're on the same page and going into this process. The group additionally reviewed some messaging that will be asking what we should be considering as we work to create new attendance boundaries at district elementary and middle schools. That opportunity actually started just this morning. It was in our staff e-newsletter, the Insider, and our parent and caregiver newsletter as well. So as I mentioned earlier, in October, when the core team meets again, they'll review the feedback that was shared in those forms and then start drafting potential scenarios based on that input. And the community will be able to provide feedback, as we talked about, in January after winter break on these possibilities. So there'll be multiple ways to stay informed during this process. As I mentioned, there will be a webpage that gets dedicated to it. We'll also have regular updates shared via email and text and in our newsletters. Community informational meetings will be held after winter break, in person and virtually, and we'll have one in March as well. And then we have hotlines open now. It's Better Future at district279.org, and then the phone number 763-391-8990. I would say we've gotten, even before this was shared this morning, we've been getting a few more questions into that email that we've been able to respond to and share, and people are just curious kind of on what the timeline is. So to have some information out today is really great. At this time, it concludes the presentation that we have, but I'm happy to answer any questions or concerns you may have.
Board members, any questions or comments?
Yes, I had one question about the community informational meetings being held after winter break and the hotlines being open now. So I have already seen a number of people who've received the information that this is coming and are starting to get a little worried and sharing widely, this is how you need to, start emailing people right now. So all of the people that are emailing to the Better Future, will all of that be comprised and included in
The feedback.
Okay.
Certainly, yes.
I assumed, but I just wanted to clarify.
We'll take anything.
Yeah.
Any information on this topic, we're going to
Okay.
process
And the only other question I had is, the policies that have been reviewed, some of them have been like revised or looked at in a few years, except for I think one of them, in quite a few years. Well, this one I guess was 2018. But, I mean, I don't think there's a problem with them, but I'm just wondering if maybe policy should just take a quick look at them and like, you know, not when it's revised, but when it's reviewed by, and just have that added so that there isn't like any kind of question that we're not doing our due diligence and making sure that these things are up to date. Because one of them was like in 2010.
So
Is it already part of that process?
It is.
Okay.
We're on like a 3-cycle review, so this
Yeah.
year would be 270, 700s, 800s, 900s. So
Okay. So that will be looked at during this year. Is either
Like,
700.
yeah, I would want to be mindful that it doesn't look like we're making changes to the
No.
policy right before we
I'm
need
not
to change.
saying revise it, but just
Yeah.
reviewed by,
Yeah,
you know, just
that makes sense.
so that it's not like, well, you guys haven't even done anything in 15 years, and now you're making all these changes.
Mhm.
That's it.
Oh, I just have a question. Is it possible to quantify like approximately how many students will be impacted that will have a change? I mean,
Right now, we don't know that.
Yeah.
okay.
So what we want to do to start is kind of set parameters and let families say, this is what's important to us when you're making those decisions. And then, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kay, then the goal is to come back, we'll work with the core group and we'll come up with the first draft versions, that there's some choices.
Okay.
And then have people choose, okay, well, I really like B and C, but I don't really like A. Okay, or any other feedback they give us. And then we'll make some tweaks and give them some more choices. That's the intention, is that there's multiple iterations that we work our way through together to say, and a lot of explanation of here's why we're doing what we're doing. So we've hired a transportation consultant to help us what the cost will be from that perspective. And we also have the company for the system that we use helping support all the demographics and the mapping changes. So it's we can visually lay everything out very detailed, and also be able to provide the information to say, if you do iteration B, that means this is the demographic change from that school, from what it was. This is the special ed ratio change. This is the EL ratio change. We'll have all that information, so we're very well informed in what that impact will be. So once we start making those, then the answer is yes, we can, but not until we get to that point.
So to that point about those type of changes, are there criteria established that we do or don't want to have changes in a certain percentage of, let's say, demographically? Like, is there anything that's been established around that? Is that kind of within ECMAC?
So we talked as a cabinet team and determined some non-negotiables. I can read through those real quick. And I'm guessing some of the criteria that families will provide us over the next several weeks might align with some of those. It's yet to be seen, but potentially. So they're kind of our non-negotiables from our cabinet team. So center our core values in all work, honor and integrity, belonging, inclusion, innovation, and excellence, transparency and intrinsic value. Ensure scenarios can function in our system, including but not limited to transportation, building utilization and capacity, enrollment, current and future, teaching learning program offerings and financial costs. Ensure scenarios have longevity in our system. Note the number of students impacted for each option. Note the student demographics for each option, so that includes racial makeup of all sites, should be close to the median of the district. Special education, free and reduced, homeless and multilingual. And then follow the teacher-student ratios established by the school board. Maintain elementary and secondary transportation service areas, and then comply with state laws, school board policy, and negotiated agreements.
Thank you.
Some considerations, not saying, so those were the non-negotiables. Some considerations might be creating or maintaining a feeder system, keeping neighborhoods intact, minimizing non-contiguous attendance areas, minimizing travel time on buses, and refraining from offering grandfathering.
Board members, would you like that to be emailed to you at all, or are you okay just it being read? Or- I can put in my superintendent.
Sure, that'd be
also. Okay.
And I think in that list, there's probably priorities people have today that might have been different in the past when boundaries
Sure.
were established too. Any other comments or questions?
The only comment that I had, and one thank you, so looks and sounds great. You mentioned that it'll come to the board sometime between April and May, it looks like. The timeline seems super tight between like the community engagement in March and then the additional school meetings in April. So I'm just a little bit concerned about the timeline and us being able to actually like receive the information in a timely manner and process it. So I don't know like what can actually happen with that. I know the timeline's tight in general, but that would be my concern just looking ahead to what that meeting.
That's actually a really good point too, because you'll have 3 new board members onboarding in January.
Okay.
We'll continually update too,
Yeah, we'll
obviously,
update.
with the superintendent's update. I think that's a great point in that. Make sure we're
Given
on, usually it's a couple of weeks' time, right, for that feedback to come in. But we'll keep everybody updated and make sure that we're doing our best to stay on
We can work our work session calendar to consider catching people up come January. Okay. Great, thank you.
All right, so next we have, we're just following up with some of the questions that were asked around the repurpose site at the last board meeting. So you asked, and we are here to answer for you. So just an update on the repurpose site, and that's going to be with Stephen Flitz, Brian Bass, and Brian Severson Hall.
So I'm going to kick us off today. So as Dr. Howe said, what we talked, we're going to share some new information, but also kind of reground a little bit because it's been some time. So again, good evening, and obviously speaking with me today, we have Brian Severson Hall, who is our Executive Director of Community Education. Kay Viella is going to be back on stage with you today, Executive Director of Community Relations. We have Ethan Neerdahl, so our Coordinator for American Indian Education. And hopefully if Joe can make it, because we're a little ahead of time, our Assistant Director of Student Services. So as you're aware, this has been a significant change for us, for our system, and especially for those staff and families at Crestview. And so throughout that process, the main goal has been to really make sure that all that families and the students and staff are cared for along the way. And so we want and have worked hard to make sure that they're feeling supported throughout this whole process. And I'm happy to report too, it's gone really smoothly since that. A lot to be proud of. And especially I'd like to thank our, not only our team, but also our Principal Webster, who along with the teachers and staff have really stepped up to make sure that they've had a successful start to the year and are really working on creating that transition path that not only respects the history of Crestview, but also the accomplishments as well. So those are the things that are kind of in the works. So I wanted to make sure we started with that. So our outcomes, as I had mentioned, is just to really briefly review the process a little bit. So I might give a little, hopefully it's familiar to you, and then to update you on community-based spaces at the site and how we're working and how we believe they're going to be used. So as you're aware, Building a Better Future shared that an elementary school would be repurposed to serve pre-kindergarten grades, enrichment, community-based programming needs. And so, of course, after a lot of research and work over a number of years, that Crestview was chosen. And so, again, just to remind you that the Crestview kindergarten through grade 5 students and staff will be moving schools in fall 2025, essentially the start of the 2025-26 school year. And so, as I mentioned, it's moving along quite well. And we're also pleased that the staff and students, by and large, have stayed at the school. That was our hope. That was our desire. One change that I did want to note, kind of a late shift that we did, was We did shift our VPK classroom to Fair Oaks because we had a last minute staff change. And so in order to avoid disruption and honor our commitment to the families and the students, we wanted to make sure that we had a good solid plan for the students, and it's going quite well. So a number of hands were involved in it, but I would also like to thank our transportation department for their flexibility and nimbleness in making that quick change for us. So that's kind of the major shift in kind of the programming piece. I just, if you weren't aware, I wanted to make sure. So again, students currently attending at Crestview will have the opportunity to choose the nearby elementary school, and they'll continue their learning there for the fall of 2025 and then remain. There's 3 schools that we had mentioned before: Edinbrook, Fair Oaks, and Zanewood are all gearing up for this process. Transportation, just a reminder, will be provided for all the school options. And Katie is going to give us a quick update on some of the things that are happening later this month in terms of that selection process. Some of you, I think, have been involved in it as board members, but that exhaustive process of determining where those changes were going to occur has been a result of ECMAC, the advisory Enrollment and Capacity Management Advisory Committee. And so they've studied enrollment patterns, the capacity and building use over time, and it had identified some recommendations both to address under-subscribed schools as well as over-enrollment. And the Building a Better Future process took us through to include 6 of our focus groups that were involved in it, such as CTE and Magnet. And all of these things have rolled up into some recommendations that include facility improvements for the repurposing of the school. And so again, we're going to kind of dig a little more into that. The Oversight Task Force did follow some criteria, which you can read about there, which was included was equitable impact, fiscal responsibility, to name just a few of those. And so that's where we've kind of landed on the plan. And then Crestview was selected in part because of the central location and also to the belief that we can expand our community services there and some of the lower student enrollment over time, which was being studied by ECMAC. And so on to the programming plans. Again, as we had previously shared in the spring, the building will be transitioning, and with the pre-K, we're excited about some of the opportunities that are going to be provided there. Specifically, we are envisioning that innovative heritage learning model, which is focused in on cultural immersion, centered in our indigenous, Hmong, East, West African, and Spanish languages. And so I think we had shared at that point, we are working, or had worked with the Northwest Suburban Integration School District on a magnet planning grant. And so we're anxiously waiting to hear. That's due at the end of September. And so we envision that grant will help us provide additional funding, obviously, for the development of our cultural immersion programming, pre-K programming. So those are things that we're waiting on, but we're excited because we think that's really going to give us that kind of jump start that we're looking for, because we want this exciting, innovative program there in a building and in a community that deserves it. So I'm going to turn this over to Brian, who's just going to touch on some of those other points.
Yeah, so for continuing with the community-based programming, this could include but not be limited to enrichment, adult and youth enrichment programming, community gathering spaces, opportunities for community partners, accessing the building and the outside space, and also as we continue to collect ideas from the community in the design process, those ideas will be added to how people access the building and utilize programming there. As you'll hear later in the presentation too, there's still currently, even with meeting our criteria for a repurposed site and what you'll hear about with our American Indian Cultural Center, there's still all sorts of space in there to offer more opportunities in addition to the needs and commitments that have already been made. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Also on this slide, you can see our district committed to explore a community access student-based health clinic. And we were awarded a grant from MDH to plan for a possible clinic. These grant dollars would cover startup costs and exploration of scope and services. And an evidence-based needs assessment will be conducted during the planning process to determine the needs of our community and scholars. As part of the grant process, we secured Park Nicollet Health Partners as a partner in exploring and building out the clinic. And after reviewing the possibility of the location at the repurposed site, we have concluded it won't work for this particular site. And Jill Danae is going to be speaking to some details around this later, and then I will also share some other potential options in the presentation that would kind of pair up nicely with the early childhood programming. So we'll get to that as well. So I think just for my own personal opinion, this is part of the process of, as you gather more community input, sometimes things shift, right? So, you know, and I'll talk about it a lot. Like right now, there's not a whole lot that's in dark pen. There's a lot that's in light pencil, right? And we kind of move to that. Now we'll talk about how some things are going to be cornerstone programs for the, you know, right now, but we still have all sorts of exploratory space and time for community input to maximize these spaces. And later, Ethan will speak to one of our core program areas for this repurposed site, which is our American Indian Cultural Center alongside our Native Language Revitalization Program. He'll share a lot of details about what we're thinking. It's very exciting, things that APAC has contributed some perspective on, so Ethan will get to that. And then just a couple of things that are tertiary related to this. We did receive late in August additional VPK seats. I think we shared that with the board, which is great, at 4 of our sites. And one of the things that we're doing, in case, because I wasn't sure that everyone knew about this, but we're doing some exploratory ways to allocate these seats differently while working with MDE. So we've added classrooms at Birch Grove and Fair Oaks. Steve already mentioned the shift that we needed to do for Crestview for VPK to Fair Oaks. We also have new classrooms at Oakview and Elm Creek. And at Oakview, we're piloting a wraparound model in coordination with our North Star Express program. So one of the feedback that we've received from participants in VPK is some people really like the half-day experience, and that's perfect for them. Some folks with kids in early childhood take our ECFE offerings that might be 2 days or 3 days a week, and that's it. And others say, how do you expect me to sign up for VPK? I work. It's only for 3 hours. What am I supposed to do the other hours of the day while I'm at work? So that's a longer-winded explanation than what I wrote down here. But what we're doing at Oakview is we're utilizing the opportunity for these VPK dollars and essentially offering wraparound care for half the cost of what we would offer for 4-star in an attempt to kind of see how much does it actually cost to execute a wraparound model. Is it something that parents are excited or drawn to? Because we just haven't had that opportunity. So far we've offered things based on how we've received money or how we've previously been set up. So we're taking advantage of this year to potentially look at, would that work for our families and community members? And if so, how then might we allocate those VPK or those early childhood seats at the repurposed site? Do you get is the connection making sense after that long-winded explanation? So we're trying to kind of say, instead of only saying, here's how we're allocated funds, so therefore we have to deliver it exactly this way, how can we do those funds, maybe other funds, parent fees, different funds, blend and braid those things and offer different experiences so it's not just limited to one option. So that's how if y'all have a better idea for me to say that in less words, I'm open. But this is how we're kind of trying to find if that's exciting for people, right? And so far people did sign up for the OP one, so that's good. but kind of how can we scale that? So these are, again, my way of thinking of, yes, we receive input, but we also adapt as we're receiving input because it's not fully baked yet, right? We haven't determined all the ingredients on it. We know it's going to be a repurposed site, but what are going to be all the ingredients to it? So those are just some quick updates on some programming plans for the site.
All right, I'm gonna dive a little bit into the feedback side of this thus far. We're gonna see some more, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but as Brian mentioned, there are some additional opportunities with the space that we have at Crestview, so we can meet our needs and commitments and have some additional possibilities. This was actually shared with our community late last spring, and there was an opportunity to provide feedback at that time on what those potential directions could be. This feedback has helped the team with narrowing the final recommendations to provide to the designers and architects. Obviously, we're still finishing up that process. So this feedback was collected via an anonymous thought exchange, and this tool participants were able to share their ideas and rate the other participants' ideas too, to try to bring kind of what those top things are to the forefront. This was shared in a variety of different ways. We had in our district communications, e-news, web, and social. We also had it in our Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center school communications. Again, e-news, web, social, even our mass notification text messages. We also had graphic displays near entrances at our Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center schools. Similarly, flyers there as well. These were shared on bulletin boards, available for pickup at main offices, and it was passed out at a lot of in-person events, which in the springtime there's always tons of them. They had PTO meetings and lots of end-of-the-year gatherings that we were able to take advantage of. They've also been in community ed communications. Based on our multilingual team, have some communications we were able to share it in, and then with the cities and Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center, they allowed us to share those in the main offices of the cities. And then media partners as well had the opportunity to talk about it. And then some of the themes that we found here in this process were after-school programs, family counseling services, special needs support, adult English classes, early childhood education, STEAM education, tutoring services, community gathering spaces, mental health support, outdoor educational spaces, cultural immersion programs, indoor recreational facilities, job placement services, and parent education programs. These are the high-level themes. I know in one of the updates you were able to receive the full list of thoughts, so you have all those. So this is kind of the AI version of what was shared. I'm just going to show you kind of what I'm seeing on my end of things. So we had 249 participants, 97 thoughts. Our rating level was very high, so we had a lot of people going in and saying yes, no to some of these things. These are kind of those themes that I mentioned right here. So it's kind of easier to see it here on the left. But essentially, once you click each of these, you get kind of the reasoning why that was associated with that theme. And this has been passed along to our team that's working on what the next steps are. So it's been really helpful to decide what we should be passing along to the construction team. And with that, I'm going to pass it along, I think, to you.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm just here to speak a little bit about the American Indian Cultural Resource Center and some of the feedback we've received from the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee. And a little backstory on how this came to be is when the thought exchange was disseminated, kind of came to my attention that anytime we elicit feedback from the community, American Indian parents and students are severely underrepresented. It's a nationwide problem with us being such a small demographic. So we brought a similar survey or stakeholder survey to the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee in May during some of our end of the year events at Northview Middle School. And in that survey, there was a series of questions. We wanted to make sure we identified parents and students from each of our sites. And we asked them a series of questions. The first being, how interested are you in the proposed heritage learning model or cultural immersion programming? And it was amazing to see that 83.3% of our parents were significantly or very interested in that, with another 10% somewhat interested, and the remaining neutral. We had none that were opposed to this cultural immersion programming. And I think a lot of that has to do with when we frame what is cultural immersion programming. It's not just language, but it's intergenerational, and it's learning through activities, learning through experiences. Some of the images on these slides are from our Dakota Language and Ojibwe Language Summer Institutes that were held at Osseo Middle School, as well as our annual powwow. And they don't tell a lot when you just look at the images, but what this cultural immersion programming is, for example, the teepee, the students are learning mathematics. They're learning astronomy, how the poles are aligned to our indigenous star knowledge. They're learning teamwork, leadership, communication, a lot of intangible skills that are more than just the simple act of putting up a teepee. So they're learning things that are aligned to grade standards, but they're also developing and cultivating a knowledge of self that is often lacking in the mainstream curriculum in the schools. We can go on to the next slide here. Some of the other questions we asked of the parents and students were, what community-based services would you like to see in the repurposed site? 80% of the parents supported outdoor classroom or nature education. Another 73% highlighted the need for community meeting spaces, with 70% advocating for early childhood. When we think of why for the American Indian Cultural Resource Center, there's a lot of reasons. It's not just for our American Indian students, but it's for all students. These past 2 years, we've been offering Ojibwe and Dakota language for credit in our high school, and more than 50% of the scholars are non-American Indian. So these students are from all different backgrounds, are curious, wanting to know more. You know, our traditional schooling has failed to adequately educate us about Indigenous people and nationhood today. So this is a way that we can build community while still providing authentic resources and experiences to our students. Some of the things that are more specific to American Indian education programming is the language revitalization programming. Currently, if you go to Northview, we've got some cultural displays. It's almost like a museum that is curated by our students and our staff to be reflective of the cultures and communities here in the Osseo School District, which represents over 95 tribal nations. So there's a lot of diversity even amongst our Indigenous population here in the district. This also includes traditional arts workshops, storytelling, and oral histories. We have a curated library with over 2,000 texts for our staff and students to use that can be searched worldwide on Destiny. So it's vetted resources by American Indian staff. We've also expressed an interest in a traditional foods and cooking, or an Indigenous food lab, when we talked about the supplemental kitchen. That was a little different than the production kitchen because we wanted people to experience authentic foods, food preparation, without experiencing food products that we've all been accustomed to today. You know, the ways that corn was traditionally used versus today it's almost been weaponized against us all as foods. And so some of the other things we're looking at are Indigenous sports and games. This past summer we hosted the second annual Wooden Stick Lacrosse Tournament at Osseo Middle School. Had participants from all around the region, so we'd like to have that also be a focus at Crestview because there's a lot of learning to be done through play and through these traditional games. It's a little bit different than the Western models of sports. Additionally, there's been a significant interest in intergenerational culture camps, not just for our American Indian students, but for everyone. And where this stems from is in statute last year, the state added Indian education for all. A lot of people aren't aware of that. It was done in Montana. And now we're kind of preemptively creating a space to train our teachers, our staff, to have capacity to effectively teach Indian education in all core subject areas, whether it's Phi-Ed, mathematics, chemistry. There's ways that we can infuse that. Additionally, we're interested in traditional ecological knowledge and the medicine garden, which currently is featured at the ESC, but that would be moving as well to Crestview. That's taken care of by community curation. And then lastly, significant amount of PD, professional development opportunities for our staff around Indian education and effectively teaching BIPOC students. So, thank you.
Hello, good evening. I'm Jill Renee. I'm going to talk a little bit about school-based health centers. So we're still partnering very closely with Park Nicollet and the Minnesota School-Based Health Alliance. So they're like the main partners working on this project with us. Right now we're getting ready to start a readiness assessment, which is really going to tell us what are the needs of our community and help us come up with a needs statement, which will help us pick our final providers. But one thing we learned, as this is like an exploratory grant, is that best practices for a school-based health center the clinic needs to have as much access to as many students as possible. And the reason is that for that is two things. One, sustainability, so the providers don't have to worry about not seeing enough clients. And two, that the students remain in their seats, so it's increased seat time. So they just pop down to the clinic and pop back into class and don't have to go off campus. So as we go, we're learning what best practices are and how we're going to sustain a clinic within our district. So.
Yeah, so based on what Jill shared and our learning through our grant to explore a potential school-based health clinic, and that's unlikely to be an option for the repurposed school, we started researching a little bit health-related services potentially with a little bit of a, not a little bit, but with a emphasis on community members with our youngest learners, since it's going to be a early childhood site. What might be some on-site health-related services that make sense for a site that has up to 125 or more? We're not limiting it to 125. If we find that that's more popular than that, we can certainly try to grow it. But this would be something, these are just some initial ideas to explore. Early childhood screening appointments. We currently do our early childhood screening at Arborview, which is on the west side of our school district. And this is an opportunity to provide the same services on the east side of the district and have it be a hub. We do try to offset that disparity by doing things like offering early childhood screening at Brookdale Library, and we go to schools and do screening, but this idea, if this is an early childhood hub, that we have some of those services right there so people see it as a hub. Potential for free pediatric dental care clinics. I just blanked on their name, but I know the first word, Minnesota Smiles or something like that. There's some Smiles groups, teach you how to brush, keep your teeth clean, and stuff like that. Yeah. But again, the idea, I think you're going to see this as I keep talking. If this is a hub, how do we draw people in so they start to see it as an early childhood place to potentially, for the repurposed site, when we talk about early childhood, we're talking about 4-year-old programming. When I talk about early childhood, I'm typically talking about birth to 4-year-olds, right? But in this case, it's more about 4-year-olds. Again, vaccine clinics, health on the go potentially at this site. Some early childhood mental health supports, whether that's literally for our youngest people or for their caregiver or parent, right? To support being a parent or caregiver. And then certainly some exploration around pediatric vision care clinics. So kind of the idea would be, this could be a nice hub for, if I have a 2 or 3-year-old, I could get some healthcare, mental health support, screening, which we do already, which we want to do anyways, dental, etc. So now we're kind of moving from exploring what a school-based health clinic might look like. That's not going to be here at Crestview. What might it look like to do more of a health-related services program? And then frankly, when those services aren't offered, those spaces could still be multi-use space, right? Because it wouldn't be like it's a dental clinic that's open every single day. It'd be unlikely. That'd have to be a pretty popular program to do that. But if it's every Tuesday is free dental care, every second and fourth Thursday night are vision screening. The other times you could use those spaces for other options. So I think this is an exciting thing that, again, this is one of those kind of shifts to this won't work, let's explore something else that's kind of risen up through some of our feedback. I think I've covered everything on that one. All right, so this one we're going back to what was shared at a week ago at the board meeting, right? So this is ATS&R's initial potential schematic, draft schematic for this building. And John, you can help correct me. I believe our other BBF sites, we have a core planning team, and that's our team. For this particular site, we have a core planning team, just like we do for all the other buildings, and we have a programming team. And so one thing, a realization that I think I had last Tuesday night, this is what happens when you're trying to marry core planning people who think about square footage versus people who think about programming, right? We use different language and we use different ways to go about expressing that language. The architects, who are amazing, and that's why they do what they do, they want to know how many square feet do you need per program? Which walls am I going to move? Where is a load-bearing beam? These are things I think I said it right. I do know about HVAC and stuff like that, right? But then we as programmers say, like I just said about the American Indian Culture Center, in my thinking, this is a core tenet, a core program, a core spirit of the space, right? Early childhood is a core program of the space. So that's why on here, you do see some things like in the dark pink, I guess, on the upper left for some of the programming that Ethan talked about, including like potential space for the lacrosse, potential space for drumming, dancing, and he mentioned the medicine garden for example, right? So these are the architect's attempt to put what are the ideas that we're gathering as we go. The other outdoor spaces, we have not really gotten any community input on that except to say people really want outdoor learning spaces. We don't know what the heck it's going to look like or where it's going to go yet, but we have to gather more information, right? Now, I think you'd be remiss to not have a playground at a site that's serving 130 4-year-olds. You know, but what does it look like? How do kids access it? Where do they enter? Where do they exit? All those kind of things. And then the other thing that I would say is a core programming is the production kitchen slash, Ethan, what did you call the additional stuff? Food, yeah, thank you. Food lab. So the idea behind that is both what Ethan stated, but also the ability to, if we're going to have a bunch of community gathering spaces, what might it look like to have an on-site kitchen or food lab that can produce opportunities for people to say, oh, I'm gonna try some foods produced by the food lab in our American Indian Cultural Center as our access to utilizing that space. So those spaces are more like what I would consider closer to being in Penn. Doesn't mean they have to be that way, but we already made a decision about not closing the school and having it be a repurposed site, which included having an educational purpose. So those two core programs do that. And then, in my opinion, everything else on there, and we can work on verbiage for one, because as soon as you show a diagram, that people think it's written in stone is the other thing we learn, right? We're a learning institution, so it's okay. We got input, and that's why we're back here, right? Because when you put something on a diagram, it feels like I don't know, it's already been stamped or a stake in the ground, however you use that phrase. But in my opinion, everything else you see on that space that says flex, I think of that as more multi-use space, right? Where it says large PD, that's multi-use space. It's just, it could be PD, it could be a large gathering, it could be this meeting. We could have all our meetings at the repurposed site, right? There's nothing that says we couldn't meet there. Same with the big yellow, which is currently a gym's cafeteria. That's just a larger multi-use. Cafeteria.
Cafeteria.
Yeah, that's a phrase I heard. That's being really creative. But that's a big multi-use space. The FACE program. We do want to have the FACE staff to have an actual place because we think they're going to have a big impact on both this next phase of gathering input, but also helping navigate and shepherd the work that happens at a place that's a community center. But then everything else, like the Welcome Center, still needs, we do want it to be, I will say the Welcome Center, the only thing we've talked about there is really, we kind of want it to be the community center's living room. The space where we all show up, we gather, whether that's a coffee cart with some of our students in transition programs operating it, where people come and wait and meet other people before they move on to community gathering times. We want it to be a showcase spot where people walk in and know they've walked into a community center. So I think that's all I'll say about the diagram, but the reason we included the diagram again is because I don't want people to get the impression that this is in dark pen. This is the attempt to kind of go, where might things fit? We wanted to make sure that we had our anchor programs established so that we can start developing those, because architects have to work in more advanced than programmers do. So this is kind of our attempt to meld those two together. So maybe let's talk about the multi-use spaces. I've talked about it a little bit. There's a lot of ways to think about multi-use. The way I think about it is back in the day when and Anthony helped me out, back in the day when I used to camp, I think about it as pack in, pack out, right? So it's not like when you go to the early childhood section of the building, that room's gonna have early childhood stuff in it that's not gonna leave at night. Do you know what I mean? This space here tonight's an example of a multi-use space. When we leave here, none of this stuff that's sitting in front of us will be here again, right? So that's what I mean by pack in, pack out. Multi-use, it's not predetermined that a certain group has that space all the time, right? Unlike the two programs I just shared, right? It's not assumed that just because they used it last year on January 2nd, they get it next year on January 2nd, right? So the idea is people will be moving in and out of there all day, every day, all year, 7 days a week, right? We already do multi-use in the school district. We've got policy 902, community use of school facilities. So I didn't do it, but if we wanted to, I could have pulled all the permits for what's going on in spaces in our school district tonight. And you would have heard about different programs happening at 30+ buildings tonight. And a whole range of things. We do PD, school board gets together, enrichment, plays, sports, music. Faith-based organizations use our buildings every week. Summer programming. So we already do multi-use. We already have ways to go about it. And we have processes to do that. And protocols. Can use it for large events. I think this particular space has the opportunity for housing larger events than a lot of our spaces outside of, frankly, the high schools. They have some pretty big spaces, but so I think that's exciting. So I did ask this question at our last architect meeting. It's not exact because everything's not been determined, but the anchor programs currently take up about 50% of the square footage in the school. The other 50% right now is designated for multi-use to figure out how to utilize it through the continued community input that we're gonna have. So it felt like when we put the diagram on the board, I saw some head nods when I said when you put a diagram up, people think that that's what's set in stone. So I don't wanna assume anything, but it's nowhere near 100% filled. In fact, I would say it's half or slightly less than half determined right now, and the rest still needs to be determined in the next year as we're gathering more community input. So I continue to still be excited about the multi-use spaces. I think it's still a large portion of the building. I think the planning team is ecstatic about the core program tenants that are going in there. I think it's pretty exciting personally, and the other ones will be just as exciting. But again, still being developed. The more multi-use spaces you have available, in my opinion, the more options you have for the community. The more defined spaces you have, the less options for the community. So I think this model is still on track to meet that, but that's part of the reason we're doing this work session tonight, is to get input and make sure that that's still a direction the school board wants, and that melds with also our honoring what our core planning team and programming planning team are doing. So I could go on because I am excited about it, but I think they're important. If we need to change some language on diagrams, I think we need to, so that it doesn't cause people to think something that's not true. And that's on us, but that was some of the learning that we got from last Tuesday night as well. So, thanks, Steve. I think that's done for my time,
Yeah.
for my section there.
I think, Kay, you're gonna bring a new one?
Yeah, so this is just a reminder on the timeline. You've seen this probably already. So this incorporates just the repurposing as a whole. So especially with our Crestview families in our community, we're going to just send out reminders between now and June 2025. We're going to be celebrating Crestview and all that it has accomplished. So we were originally sharing this back in the spring, so we've been doing that now, and we're continuing to do that onward. We're going to have an opportunity to preview, or the families are going to have an opportunity to preview transferring schools, so the 3 transferring schools that Crestview families have to choose from. That's going to happen in late September, actually that Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, that last week of September they're set for. Construction is set to start at Crestview this summer, so that's why we're here talking to you tonight about those details. Crestview staff and students are going to begin their new journeys then at their transferring schools in September of 2025, and then our newly repurposed site will be opening in September 2026. So just next steps here, in addition to the dot exchange, community input is being gathered via some focus groups to learn just a little bit more detail and just fine tune some of those question marks that we have. Community members wanting to share more are welcome to email betterfuture@district279.org over the next couple of weeks as well. And then detailed information will continue to be shared online. We have 2 websites going right now. So we have, if you're looking specifically for the improvements to the site that we're talking a lot bit about tonight, that's at district279.org/betterfuture. If you're a Crestview family wanting to know more about what that transition looks like for you or have some questions in relation to that, district279.org/repurposing is the website for that. Now at this time, we'll turn it back over for any questions or concerns you have.
Great, thank you. Board members, questions or comments?
I just have one clarifying question. The 3 days that they can preview, is that 1 day per school, or is it 3 days per school?
It's 1 day per school, so the Tuesday is going to be at Edinburgh. The same schedule we followed each night, so they start at 5 o'clock each night. Families will have an opportunity, they can go to 1, 2, 3, whatever it might be, completely up to them. So Edinburgh's the first night on that Tuesday, then it's Fair Oaks, and then it's St. Wood. So Fair Oaks is Wednesday, St. Wood is Thursday. We will be offering transportation for families if they are able to get to Crestview, if they're like a walking family perhaps, and then they can go to, they'll commute shuttle to those 3 sites those nights as well.
Is there an alternative or like a backup plan for families who would really like to be with school but aren't able to on that designated time?
Yep, we can definitely, and we have since even the springtime, they are welcome to do like an individual school tour. And we've shared all sorts of different ways that they can either call the school. There's also a school tour button right on websites that families can pick right online at the time they would like to come to their school. And all of our principals are more than happy to take them on a tour of the school. So yeah, if this doesn't work, there are definitely opportunities in addition.
Perfect.
I can't tell you how excited I am about this. I'm so excited about it. I'm glad we have all the feedback that we have. I mean, I'm from the days where the pack and go was ECFE. And that's no fun. So it's exciting to see this, and as a person who's done developmental screening, to be able to refer to a clinic that's going to happen at a clinic, but like we call them little clinics, mini clinics, where they come in and do dental or vision, that would be really exciting. And to have enough space for the American Indian Cultural Center and the heritage programs, I think it's really perfect for our community, and I'm pretty excited about it.
I think for me, one of the thoughts that I've had along the way is ensuring that we've got good asset utilization and we've got the funding sources that will cover it, so that we're not increasing capital needs that aren't associated with serving students. And just, I know that there's been a lot of due diligence to make sure that the funding sources follow in the right place. I think that 50% still looking to determine what's going to be there feels a little bit like a lot at this stage. But I wonder if there's opportunity to look at programming that other districts offer that we don't offer yet that could go in there, particularly thinking about it being at such a central location that could it serve after school families of multi ages. So it's like one place for all of the family to go for after school activities or programming that that maybe just kind of has a broader service. I'm going to throw something out there, driver's ed. If that would be an opportunity to explore, because we do have a neighboring district that offers that, and that's not something that we can offer. So I'm just wondering if there's some maybe innovative ways to say what would we like to offer that this could accommodate that we don't do today. I think about like multi-age tutoring. It'd be great to have like a parent education hub. So I think there's just that central location makes it very desirable for some really good mission-focused, innovative ideas. So maybe recasting the thinking and evaluation again.
Those are all great things that could happen in those multi-use rooms for sure.
And I think that matches some of what Ethan shared about some intergenerational opportunities too. It doesn't have to be exclusionary to the American Indian Cultural Center, right? Like, what if that's, some of this I think is, how do you also create the culture at a community center versus an elementary school, right? Or a space where multiple cultures, intergenerational, i.e. our community, is gathering, right? And so that's even why we've started to have some of this. What does the space you walk into look like? How does it embrace all the things that are in that building? Because it's not one thing. It shouldn't, I'm not picking on an elementary school, but the murals shouldn't just look like it's, if you're walking into an elementary school, I would love it that the artwork and the murals look like you're walking into an elementary school, right? If you're walking into a community center, in a community gathering space, how does it also reflect that? So there's a lot of stuff we haven't even touched yet, but that's part of what you're speaking to, Tanya. And we're not opposed to adding another anchor program, to your question. It just hasn't yet surfaced, right? We still have more ideas than we have space, but that's why we've kind of stopped it, so that, because the multi-use spaces don't prevent us from it allows us the most opportunity to have the most things in there, but it's also okay if we find one thing that surfaces, and it might not surface for 2 years till after it opens. That's okay. We can always adjust then too and say we found, because it's going to take some getting the word out, even literally word of mouth and literally marketing, for people to know here's a new spot that's different than what we've had here before, right? We haven't even talked about marketing or staffing the place. We haven't talked about any of that. We're just saying what are the components and ingredients that we want there, and what are the ingredients that we have not yet surfaced from community that we need to continue to explore.
Yeah,
So,
and I would just add, I think what is going to be an exciting sort of way to market it is how do people engage in that space? So what does it look like? How inviting is it? So, if I'm in the community, what's available to me, even if I'm not in the center? So that's where I think the conversations around the grounds are so exciting as well.
We even thought splash pads.
There are splash pads, sure. But just, again, to sort of show that, really become that, it attracts all sorts of people to that site, I think is going to help some of that evolutionary sort of pieces.
and we know we're going to have to add parking.
Yeah.
We don't want the parking to eat up all the outdoor natural space either, but it's also, if you want a lot of people to be utilizing, you're thinking about access via transportation too. So we're, and even working with the city on where the limited busing would come in, whether that's through the neighborhood or right off Zane, you know, so those are even some things we haven't really gotten.
Get a
into
small
the
walking path around
walk-
it or
Yeah,
something.
like what's up with the walk, yeah, an internal walking path and current ways that people can or can't access that space. Like there's some parkland and walking path on the
Yeah.
west side of Zane that doesn't actually connect. You have to stop, go down, and then come up over, right? Are there other ways that we can connect to other park resources that are already there? So it makes it almost like a natural flow that if I'm walking in this park, I just keep going and now I'm at this new community center and I'm accessing the things that are available there. So these are even things we're working with the city on.
Yeah, well, we touched on some of the traffic calming on
Traffic,
Zane and
yeah.
what might that look like, you know, so that again, it opens up into the community.
And I do want to give a shout out to Brooklyn Park. Park Center Face had their back to school activity, and Stephen Kelly and I were able to go. And the reason why I'm bringing it up, I want to give a shout out to the library for one. They were just giving brand new books to kids if they were there. And then we had the community center was there. They had so many activities. It was insane. Salsa del Sol, look it up. Salsa's good.
The Health on the Go.
And the Health on the Go is why I brought it up to either one if you want to speak to it. It's actually the owner, it was a Claudia. So she got a grant, or did Brooklyn Park get a grant, and it's her.
I think she said she got a grant through Brooklyn Park, I thought. Was it through the?
It was through this
Hennepin
government,
County.
I think.
It was
she said.
Hennepin County,
Yeah,
yeah.
Hennepin County. But it's actually Health on the Go, so she can actually not even just be at this site, but they can go to different sites where parents will be able to say they're at this site this day, and they can go get things done.
Yeah, it's like a
So,
little house.
yeah, it was
on
very
wheels.
impressive, very impressive, so.
And we do that 2 to 4, just so everyone knows. We do Health on the Go at we call it the Little House too, because
Oh,
it's like
okay.
it, but we offer that 4 times a year at the enrollment center. Health
Oh.
on the Go. This is part of that work with Sept, Hennepin County, enrollment, that you remember back to our whole multi-things that you're able to access in one spot. So we sometimes offer Health on the Go at the enrollment center too, in partnership with Hennepin County in this particular thing. So, yeah, and that's why you have, even when you're designating where you're doing idea generating, outside can be multi-use spaces too, right? So just like this little bump out that can hold up to 3 or 4 food trucks for community events, it can bump out and hold Health on the Go, right? Like, so even thinking about multi-use outdoor spaces is something that's important too. So that these are some of the other, again, people come, like the ideas that folks generate are beautiful, right? Like it's not like we get negative ideas
Right.
really, you know, but how to accommodate them is a tricky thing.
Brian, is Health on the Go, is that a place where students are able to get a physical for high school athletics?
Depends on, well, that certainly happens at school-based health clinics, right? That's one, because just think of like a normal healthcare spot and multiple things that you can get support for if you're there. I don't know.
But right now, the Health.
I don't know if Health on the Go offers that. I don't know. I don't go
She
deep enough.
said
but-
that she didn't, the
Right.
one that was at the FACE event said that she can, whatever the need is,
Right.
you
she
let
can
them know
meet
ahead of time and they staff it
Yeah.
appropriately in order
Yeah.
to
Oh,
accommodate that
thank
need.
you. Yeah. That's good.
That's a cool space. I mean, I'm thinking blood drives, mammograms, how many cool things you could do. That's so cool.
Yep.
All right, are there any other follow-up questions or comments?
Thank you, Jill and Ethan.
And thank you for being really responsive to the last board meeting and being able to kind of assemble some additional information. That's really helpful.
Yeah, you're welcome, and thanks for surfacing your questions so we can be responsive, right? We can't respond if we don't know, so. And like I said, it's already helping, even that diagram thing, that's helping me the most. Like that, I can just tell that needs to just be a little, I can figure out a side by side.
Well, just say we got forced to
Draft.
do it because we had to create some bubbles for the architects. So.
Programmers and architects can get along.
Yeah.
We're just working on it, you know?
It made a lot of sense. It helped advance our thinking too. So.
Yeah.
Okay, calendar.
Yeah, just our last item here, just for the board, it would have been taken off your calendar, so there was a tentative hold for extra work session on September 17th, so we will not be holding that. I know you're sad, but that we won't be holding that one. And we'll keep an eye on, Thomas, as you had mentioned, we'll keep an eye on making sure we report back on attendance boundaries so that you're continuously getting that information, because the final call is yours. And then I'm kind of excited, at the beginning of October, we're going to be going over, sharing some information on our new ELA curriculum and going over the whole structured literacy review. So we'll have that for you in October. So, and if you think of anything else that you're interested in that you want on a work session topic, just let us know. So, then I'll hand it back to you next time.
Okay, all right. Any other, this is in Rotary, business for the good of the club? Any other business for the good of the board?
The four-way test.
All right, then that will conclude us. So this work session is adjourned at 7:11 p.m. That is fun. Yeah.
Oh.